Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar, 10 questions every digital marketer should be asking themselves and how to get the answers. My name is Neil Scaife and I'm the Strategy Director at Hub, one of the two digital agencies co-hosting this webinar, the other being our sister agency, Receptional. I'll be introducing you to two of my colleagues at Receptional who will be our subject matter speakers for today shortly. Hub and Receptional joined forces some time ago for three reasons chiefly. One, and very obviously, we had a number of clients in common. Secondly, we felt we had very complementary skills. But thirdly, and probably most interestingly, we found that our clients, in striving to enhance their digital marketing effectiveness, were raising the same issues and asking the same fundamental questions time and time again. And we felt that by unifying our resources and offering them a broader, more holistic range of services, we'd be well equipped to help them address those challenges. In order to give you a flavour for the material we're going to be covering for the next 45 minutes or so, we've prepared a short scene setter video which we'd like to play for you now.
Change is everywhere, change is inevitable, and change has become the prevailing facet of life in every business today. Nowhere is this more true than in the field of digital marketing, constantly evolving, constantly innovating, and at an ever-accelerating pace. New disruptive technologies will arrive. 50% of all searches are predicted to be voice by the end of 2020. Algorithm updates will become more frequent and more complex, with user behavior metrics becoming every bit as important as website metrics, if not more so. There were 12 major Google updates in 2019 alone, and a further 5 so far this year. Text-based content is becoming saturated. Of the 1.8 billion websites currently in existence, 1 billion are blogs. That's 1 for every 8 people on the planet. Video and audio formats are set to become much more impactful, therefore forcing brands to markedly rethink their search and content strategies. We've already come to terms with the fact that each year, marketing gets more expensive and more competitive. It's a given. Expect digital marketing to keep changing over time. What worked once may well not work in the future. Technology is becoming ever more sophisticated, and with machine learning, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence knocking firmly at the door, we're all going to be on a roller coaster ride into the future. Some things just don't change, however, such as the fundamental questions to which every digital marketer needs robust, objective answers in order to resolve key issues or seize key opportunities. Questions like, in what ways are the design and build of my website jeopardizing its ability to be ranked highly by search engines? Which keywords drive the bulk of search traffic in my sector or category? What are the most successful tactics my competitors are adopting in order to maximize their share of that available search volume? What are the content topics and formats which generate the highest levels of engagement in my sector or category?
Well, hopefully that short video has served two key purposes. Firstly, to give you a flavour for the nature of the material we're going to unveil over the next 45 minutes, but also to reassure those of you that have attended that you're in the right webinar. Two things briefly before I introduce our subject matter speakers from Receptional. Firstly, do please feel free to ask any questions you feel disposed to. We'll do our very best to curate them and respond to as many as we can live before we have to leave you. If we do run out of time in terms of answering of questions, we'll be sure to respond directly to questioners on a one-to-one basis afterwards. Secondly, if you're having any technical issues, you'll see there's a test my connection button just below your window. Do please try that. If that doesn't resolve the issue, then just use the chat facility to make contact with our tech team and they'll respond to you and try to resolve the issue you're having. Okay, on to the meat of our presentation today. Of the 10 questions, we've split them into 2 groups of 5, hence 2 subject matter speakers. They are Dave Clough, who is the search director here at Receptional, and Justin Deville, who is the managing director of Receptional. Dave is going to tackle the first 5 questions, so I'd like to hand over to him now. Over to you, Dave.
Yes, excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm Dave, and we're going to start with question 1 at the top. How much authority does my website have compared to others in my industry? Well, so Google uses hyperlinks to map out the internet. They record who links to who, and by doing so, they can analyze the relationships between all these websites. Google interprets links like little online testimonials. Each link says, these guys are okay, you can trust them, and they have value. They then have to use this data to decide which websites are best, the most popular, and the most trusted. The websites that Google deems to be the best, generally speaking, appear at the top of Google's search results. So domain authority is a metric used by the industry for gauging the power of a website's backlink profile. As you can see here, when you search for the keyword banks, Google is presenting these institutions in order of their domain authority, with Barclays appearing at the top with a domain authority of 70. Now, as you would expect, the higher you appear in the search engines, the more website traffic you're going to receive. The industry tool SEMrush estimates that Barclays are likely to receive around 1 million more visitors each month than HSBC. With all that in mind, we're going to play a little game of higher and lower, comparing the domain authorities of these 3 retailers. So if Debenhams have an authority score of 78, do we think Next are likely to have a higher or lower authority? Well, if you thought higher, you'd be correct. Their authority is 84. But what about Primark? Now, they're a newer brand, but they receive a lot of press coverage. What do we think? Well, their authority score is actually lower at 75. But actually, all those scores are particularly high. They're all very, very well thought of websites. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how different brands fare on the authority scale. So what all this means is that if you want to rank better on Google, you need to have links pointing to your website. However, it's not just about quantity. Authority is a score that measures quality as well. You don't want links from any old websites. You want links pointing to you from high quality websites, i.e. websites that have high domain authority scores themselves. So the key to beating your competition is generating links from the best websites possible. And to do so, you'll need to create content that's compelling enough that other websites are going to want to share it. And this is no mean feat, I assure you, which is why we're proud at Receptional to have had our campaigns featured across some of the best websites across the internet. And this takes us to question 2. Is my website good enough to appear at the top of Google? And this is a really important question because it's not just about those links I've mentioned. Google cares about the quality of your website as well. So why does the website design matter for SEO? Well, let's look at it from Google's point of view. Putting it bluntly, Google's algorithms do not care about your business. They may want your business, but they're not on your side. So Google cares about its users. Its customers are those who are using its search engines and products. Google doesn't want its users finding rubbish websites using their search engine. That's why it matters to Google that your website is well designed and it needs to offer a good user experience. So websites with technical issues result in a poor user experience, and Google can detect these issues. There's loads of technical elements to consider. However, a standard SEO audit will uncover those and which are harming your performance the most, and therefore will give you an idea of what you need to prioritize and fix first. 2 common issues we see time and time again are around site speed and mobile usability. So we know we're in a mobile first era. Yeah, I'm sure we've all been on mobile sites where you can't read the text very well or click on things, or maybe the menu doesn't work. Now, industry surveys tell us that 85% of users think that a company's mobile website should be as good, if not better, than the desktop counterpart. So basically, if your website doesn't offer a great mobile user experience, you're going to be in trouble with Google as well as your users. As for slow websites, we all know how painful they can be. So it should come as no surprise that over half of mobile users will leave a site if it doesn't load after 3 seconds. Also, slow websites harm your conversion rates. Therefore, the faster your website is, the better it will rank on Google and the more likely it will to convert any traffic that it generates. And believe me, Google knows that your website is slow. Take M&S, for example. Google has marked their site as being slow, which won't be doing their SEO performance any favors, not to mention it'll be frustrating for their customers. So find out how slow Google thinks your website is and gain a solid understanding of what needs to be done to speed up your website. And this kind of information comes as standard as a part of any SEO analysis. And that takes us to question 3. What share of search traffic do I get relative to my competitors? Well, the first thing we need to answer here is, who are your competitors? And don't assume you know the answer here. You see, what I'd like you each to do is to write down like a main product or service that you offer. Think of a keyword that a customer might use to find your business, such as 0% credit cards or cheap refurbished laptops or whatever it is you do. Then write down the name of your number one competitor, such as Barclays if you're HSBC, or Laptops Direct if you sell refurbished laptops. Finally, search online using your mobile and have a look and see if search for your main product and have a look and see if your number one competitor is actually at the top of Google. I'm going to wager that for the majority of you, the number one site ranking in Google is not the same as who you perceive to be your number one competitor. In the case of my example, Money Saving Expert actually ranked number one for 0% credit cards, and they're not even a credit card provider, they're a comparison site. So the first rule is know who your search competitors are, and don't expect Google to mirror your own expectations. So once you know who your search competitors are, you have to compare your traffic side by side. And here's why. Let's look at DPD, for example. They have over 700,000 visitors a month in the UK, and that's a lot of SEO traffic. However, it's not quite as impressive when we compare them against Parcelforce, who receive 1 million visitors a month. But what about Hermes? Well, Hermes enjoy approximately 2.4 million organic visitors a month. Now even Parcelforce doesn't look so good. This is why it is vital that you examine your performance in the context of your peers. Without benchmarking, your data means nothing. And it's great to look at performance side by side with competitors, but that insight becomes so much more powerful when you examine it over time. It enables you to answer questions like, are we catching up? Are we losing our lead? As seen here, Hermes is not only bigger, but it's growing at a faster rate. But what's driving this growth? Is it because their SEO campaigns are working harder and they're increasing their visibility? Or is it because maybe online shopping is becoming more popular and people are having to sort of go on their website to track their packages? To answer that question, we need to delve a little bit deeper. Specifically, we need to look at their brand and non-brand keyword traffic separately because there are massive implications of each. But generally speaking, non-brand keywords are searched for by your potential customers, whereas brand keywords are searched for by existing customers, those who are essentially preordained or pre-qualified. And here's exactly what I mean by that. So for brand, right, as you might expect, the key phrase is going to contain the brand name. So Hermes tracking or send a parcel with Hermes. In most cases, a business's own website will always rank number one on Google for their brand name by default. Therefore, that traffic has not been earned through SEO, and SEOs can't take credit for it. It's standard. Whereas SEO really is all about non-brand traffic, i.e. those keywords like best UK courier and cheap delivery services. It's not guaranteed that your website's going to rank for non-brand keywords, and the organic channel is dedicated to bringing around the kind of improvements that would increase the likelihood that you'll appear. Parcel to Go, for instance, have clearly done an incredible job to rank on Google for the keyword best UK courier. This is why you have to look at your non-brand traffic in isolation to really understand your SEO performance. If you don't, then your insights are going to be completely skewed by your brand keywords. So when we look at Hermes again through the lens of non-brand keywords, it tells a very different story. It turns out that Parcelforce receives more non-brand traffic than Hermes do. So if you think you're doing a great job in search, make sure you're looking at the right metrics. And of course, all of this data comes as standard with one of our client reports. Question 4. Which keywords drive the bulk of our search traffic in my sector? The search landscape is changing. Google themselves state that 15% of search queries are new and original. They've never been seen before. Therefore, you need to periodically revisit your keyword strategy. And a lot of people don't do this. Let's look at the travel sector, for example. The data tells us that over the last decade, fewer and fewer people are searching for generic single-word phrases like holidays. Meanwhile, we see an increase in the number of people searching for long-tail, more specific keywords like all-inclusive family holidays. And that's not really a surprise. Searchers are becoming savvier, more sophisticated than ever before. And this is all about user intent. We know that the quality of the results we get in Google are based on what we search for. Therefore, it's not enough to know where the high search volumes are and aim blindly for those. We need to consider user intent. In other words, going after the right keywords, those that are used by our ideal customers and that are most likely to result in a sale of some kind. A great way to figure out how to attract the right kind of customer is to actually look at your competitors and see how they're positioning themselves in the market. And therefore, where should your business fit in the mix? And this takes us to question 5. Where do my competitors tend to focus their targeting? As I just mentioned, searchers are becoming savvier. Therefore, correct keyword targeting is essential when it comes to attracting the right customers. Keyword targeting is all about your USPs and how you position yourself in the market, i.e. why should a customer choose you rather than a competitor? Our advice here would be to use the data available strategically to diversify from your competitors and carve your own niche. The purpose of all of this is to go after less competitive keywords while simultaneously driving volume of sales. For example, in the travel sector, if you want people to find your products and services, you need to use the language they use. But you also have to consider who's occupying that space already. We can see this in action in the search results for keywords like holidays 2020. In the holidays niche, it's massively competitive, and companies in this scene, they know that. So they don't all go after the keyword holidays. Instead, they hone in on their USPs. They target the right customers in search, and this is what you should be doing too. The companies seen here all essentially offer similar trips to the same audience. However, they use different terminologies to separate themselves apart from one another. TUI focuses on all-inclusive holidays, On the Beach focuses on cheap holidays, and First Choice have optimized towards holiday deals. By carving their own niche, they can dominate their own space, even if that space is slightly smaller. So, in summary, there are 3 things to remember. Keywords can be used to inform how your business positions itself versus its competitors. Align with the phrases and terms your ideal customer uses and attract the right type of traffic. And thirdly, intentionally leverage your USPs to differentiate yourself in a crowded market. Thank you for listening. I'm going to hand over to Justin now, who's going to take you through the second half of this presentation.
6 to 10, so the remaining ones. And I think Neil had mentioned earlier on about sending in questions. I can see a couple of questions have come in, but I would say one of the benefits of being on a live webinar is that we are able to answer any questions you've got. So the stuff that Dave has been through that makes you want to ask more, then please do before the end of the webinar, and we will answer all of your questions. If we don't get a chance to do it today, then we will follow up afterwards and get you a reply. So no question goes unanswered. So question 6, and this question is really about share of voice. What are your competitors doing to maintain and improve their share of voice in your market? And the fact is that we're now all publishers. We're all running our own websites or social media channels, and lots of us are running search campaigns. And there is a scarcity of attention, which is why we've got this picture of a dog in front of us, because this is a campaign that was run by spa seekers. And it highlighted the fact that spa seekers allow you to take along your dog to the spa. And lots of these shots were shared on social media, as you can see in the next couple of slides. I mean, who wouldn't want to share this shot with friends and family? And then finally, there's a lovely shot of this dog very clearly enjoying himself. And as serious-minded marketers, of course, you might ask why we're showing this provocative campaign and what's it really got to do with marketing. Well, the fact is that, of course, it's to do with marketing. It's about getting your brand out there to a wider audience, and in this case, this campaign was incredibly successful, and it's been replicated in lots of other markets as well. And in particular, it's very good, this campaign, for generating links back to the website, and so that brand's website now ranks better on Google than it would have done previously for its target keywords. So I think the question about success depends upon the metrics that we're using to measure that campaign. And I think we'll see on the next slide that we're able to learn an enormous amount from what our competitors are doing, because we're able to spot what successes they're having, which is really important because we're able to pick out the quick wins where we can see things that they're doing that we're not doing quite as well and build upon that. And we're also able to look at what they're not doing well. And the fact is that digital marketing is relatively new, and in most markets, your competitors won't be following the best practice at the moment. And so there'll be weaknesses in their campaigns that you'll be able to capitalize on. And as an agency, we use tools such as SEMrush to understand what your competitors are doing. We're able to look at the quality of the campaigns that they run and the quantity of content that they're producing. As I say, we can spot opportunities, and even in really saturated markets, which are very competitive, channels such as YouTube are often underused, and we're able to identify that. And finally, I think one of the great changes in advertising targeting over the last few years has been that if you've got a really big and powerful brand who you're up against as a competitor, it's now possible to leverage the investment that they've made in their brand by targeting people who are searching for that brand, by targeting people who have visited that website. And so I think there's a number of different opportunities that we can highlight from doing that research. Next slide, please. I think what we have on the next slide then is an example of the approach that we might take if we were doing what we call a content gap analysis. And what we're doing here is really looking for the content that you've got on your website and comparing it to the content that your competitors have got on their site. And we'll choose a competitor that's doing content marketing really well. And what that does, it highlights content that's attracting traffic to your competitors' websites, which you don't have yet on your site. And Dave actually did some work looking at a site, as you'll see in the boxes at the bottom, and he was able to identify 23 different pages on a competitor's site, which had the potential to attract up to 39,000 visitors a month. And off the back of that research, we're able to put together an editorial plan. And for instance, you might publish one piece of content every 2 weeks for the next year, in which you then know that there's a good chance that you'll be able to rank well for that content and will attract those visits which are relevant to your brand. So it's a really good way of planning your content in a way that you know is going to be successful. Next slide, please. So let's move on to the next question. Question 7. What are the content topics and formats that generate the highest levels of engagement in my sector? Well, let's start with a problem. There's a real challenge, and it's a data challenge. And the fact is that today we create 7 times more data than we did in 2010, so just 10 years ago. And sifting through all that data so that we can understand the topics and the content is a huge problem. And that's why it's worth doing our research thoroughly. And if we think about the topics on the next slide, one of the tools that we've built at Receptional is a tool called Search Eye, which is on the next slide. And that does one thing very simply. It takes your market, takes all the keywords that are relevant to your business, and it sorts them into various pots. And these pots are themed around intent. So what's the searcher thinking about when they're typing in that keyword? And so you'll see the top bubble there, we talk about competitor terms. And I've already mentioned that nowadays it's really easy to target your competitors' traffic in the search listings. And I think the next slide actually gives a really nice breakdown of how we look at that across the funnel. So we start at the very top with the question keywords. So the how, what, why, where. And then we work our way down the funnel, if we can just see that on the next slide, with different types of keywords, and we target each of them in slightly different ways. And so, for example, I've mentioned competitor terms, but there's also temporal indicators. So people who are searching for something they want now is often a great sign that they're looking to buy. So we've got all those different pots of keywords, and for your market we're able to look at how all of your prospective customers are likely to be searching, and we have campaigns at different levels of the funnel that capitalize upon that intent. Next slide. And then we come on to formats. So there are a huge variety of different content formats, and I'm not going to run through them all. 6 of our favorites are on the screen there in front of you. And we use a tool called BuzzSumo, which helps us to investigate any given market and look at the content topics and the content formats that are working well, so that we know that when we're producing content for your brand, we know that that's the sort of content that is going to resonate with your audience. Next slide. And I think there's another tool that's really worth mentioning as well, which is the Facebook ad library. If you haven't used this tool, it's a really useful way of looking at what your competitors are advertising on Facebook. And so you do just type in the brand and your competitors' ads will come up there. And this tells us not just what ads they're running, but also how long those ads are run for. And that's crucial because no one in their right mind is going to run an ad for a long period of time if it's not paying for itself. So we can see the formats and the types of ads that are working really, really well. And that segues quite nicely into the next question, which is about social media. So next slide, please. Thank you. So what successes are your competitors enjoying with social media marketing that you are not? Now, obviously, I can't answer that question for every single one of your brands here and now. But what we can do is ask, why is that question important? And the fact is that Google and Facebook in the UK now account for 80% of digital marketing spend. So as marketers, we spend 80% of our digital marketing budgets with Google and Facebook. And you can see the reasons why, because they capture the lion's share of the eyeballs within any given market. And so if you're not advertising on Facebook and social media, then that is very often a missed opportunity. And I'm thinking of Facebook and Instagram in this case as well. So it's really important that we're thinking about social marketing as well as search. Next slide. And so, as I say, I can't tell you what the answer is for the right marketing mix for your business. But I thought I would tell you a little bit about my ad preferences on Facebook and how that has translated into advertising in my Facebook profile. So if you go into your Facebook account and you scroll down quite a long way, you can find out how it is that Facebook is targeting you with ads. And you can see both demographic information, but also I think as marketers, much more interesting is the brands that you've interacted with and how that might be influencing how Facebook sees you. And I've highlighted just at the bottom there that at some point I've interacted with the HelloFresh brand. So the other morning, very early, I went onto Facebook, I spent a couple of hours scrolling through it, and here are the ads that I saw during the time that I was scrolling that relate to that HelloFresh there. And they're quite revealing about this particular market. So for those of you who don't know the brand, HelloFresh is a food delivery service, obviously has been incredibly popular during lockdown. So if we look on the next slide, what we can see are some of the ads that I encountered. The first three are actually promoting HelloFresh, but they're from affiliates within the market. So clearly affiliate marketing is working for HelloFresh. There's also then a series of competitors, but there's also niche players. So there's a vegan delivery service, there's an alcohol delivery service. So depending what you want within the food delivery niche, then everything is catered for. And so that tells us a number of things as marketers. I mean, first of all, that affiliate marketing might be worth testing because it seems HelloFresh is running it, but no one else is. But also that Facebook is completely saturated with these types of ads. And it may be that there's other channels that we'll want to test as well, because there'll be better, more cost-effective opportunities on, say, YouTube. So anyway, that hopefully gives you some insight as to the sort of information that's available on Facebook at the moment to help you plan your campaigns. Next slide, please. And next slide. So we're moving on to question 9. What's the optimal level of spend for my brand? Well, this is an interesting question. We're moving into more interesting territory now, because so far we've only looked at what's happening in the market at the moment and what's happened historically. With this question, we're trying to think about the future. And the fact is that there's no right answer as to how much you should be spending on any given channel. But there are some frameworks that we can look at. And I've got one in front of us here. And this is Google's suggestion for how you might want to split out your spend if you're advertising just on Google. Now, we acknowledge that you might want also to invest in Facebook and email marketing and other channels as well. But this is Google's framework, and it gives us some insight. They are suggesting 60% of your marketing spend should be on search, 30% should be on display, and 10% on video. And I think very few brands are advertising in those proportions. What we often see is that people are perhaps overspending on search and not investing enough in building up their brand, which will obviously then help to reduce the costs of your search advertising too. So that's one framework that we could look at and compare with your existing spending. On the next slide, what we then start to do is to break down our investment into what we think of as a portfolio. So if we think of marketing as investment, and it should be an investment that gets you a return, hopefully as quickly as possible. What we know is that in digital marketing, because everything's moving so quickly, is that what works today may not work as well tomorrow. And there are plenty of examples over time of where Google has changed the rules. So in SEO, for example, they might change the algorithm without warning, and that may affect your rankings. On Google search, shopping campaigns have changed. They went from being a free model to a paid model. On LinkedIn, for example, we know that the costs of advertising have increased fairly rapidly over the past couple of years. So what we want to do is to make sure that you've got an balanced investment portfolio. That means you're not too exposed to any one given channel. And as the next slide shows, what we want to be doing is covering a number of different activities. And I think there's two advantages to investing in this way. One is, of course, that we are mitigating risk, but also that all of these channels should be supporting each other. So that we know there's often kind of several touch points before someone will buy from a brand, and you should be present on all of those different touch points. But also it allows us to kind of think about allowing some budget to be testing new channels, which may be TikTok or it may be something else, but at least there's newer channels where we may be getting a more cost-effective return from our investment. By investing in those areas now, we're setting ourselves up for future success. So next slide, please. And then finally, question 10. Taking into account everything we've talked about in the webinar so far, within 6 months, what do we estimate the traffic levels of your website will be? This is a fantastic question. And I think there's one particular challenge to answering it, which is worth mentioning, which is that lots of brands that we talk to haven't invested in data capture in the way that we would want to be able to forecast robustly. And I'm talking here about capturing Facebook data as well as LinkedIn data and the traditional Google Analytics, because I think there is a wealth of information that we can learn about your target audience by setting up analytics properly. So with that in mind, what we would then start to do is to plot out a scenario that says, where do we want to be in terms of market share? The next slide shows that we might think at the moment our market share is 3%, and we might be suggesting that we would want to double that to 6% over the next couple of years. That allows us then to put some markers, some milestones at the 6 month stage to say, where do we think we should be after 6 months if we're going to achieve that doubling of market share over the next couple of years. And then once we've got those, once we've got that big picture agreed, we can start to break down each niche, as the next slide shows, so that we're starting to calculate where those returns will come from. And this is an SEO forecasting slide that we might use. It could equally apply to paid social or paid search. And what we see there is that we look at kind of what's the cost per click in a particular market, and therefore what's our budget, what's the conversion rate that we're likely to be looking at, and if we assume average order value, then what's the revenue that we're capable of achieving within a particular niche. And of course, revenue isn't the same thing as profit at all, but it starts to build our model. So that niche by niche, we're going and calculating how we're going to get to that target of where we want to be in 2 years' time. And if we move on to the next slide, what we can then do is translate that into a timeline. This is again for SEO. We might do something similar for other channels. And this just shows, it's a chart of what would happen if we didn't invest, so the sort of revenue we might expect, versus the investment that we might, versus the revenue that we might achieve if we increased our investment in SEO over a 12-month period. And hopefully that's the sort of useful information that you can go back to a finance director with and justifies spending any money on marketing at all. And it's particularly important to lots of businesses in the current climate. So hopefully there's some useful information there. What I'll do now is I'll pass back to Neil and see if we've got any questions coming in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Dave. You both covered an awful lot of ground there. So much appreciated, and hopefully our audience found that informative. And hopefully a number of the questions, challenges, issues in terms of digital marketing effectiveness they're facing on a day-to-day basis, we've addressed in the content we've covered. Obviously, trying to condense 10 pretty far-reaching and fundamental aspects of digital marketing into a 45-minute webinar session is no easy task. But hopefully you feel we've succeeded, at least to some extent. Clearly, undertaking the process, with a live client, with live issues, is a pretty involved and detailed process. So unsurprisingly, we felt the need to productize this. If I could have the next chart, please. To that end, we've developed a specific product called unsurprisingly, a digital landscape report, and this is very much a granular deep dive into your digital marketing effectiveness in the context of your category footprint. As a brand, your absolute performance is of course interesting, but it's considerably less interesting than your relative performance against a benchmark of competitors. Marketing is a competitive world, so that's really the aspect that brands tend to agonize about. How am I performing relative to my competitor set? So typically these exercises, these undertakings live and breathe on that universe of competitors by which we're trying to benchmark your performance, and above which we're trying to elevate you. So ultimately, these things are very comprehensive, very detailed, and very bespoke. Certainly a reaction we've had from a number of clients that approach us to do this is that if ever there were a time to reassess and reboot their digital marketing activity, now might well, for fairly obvious reasons, be the time to do it. In the sense the world is changing at a fair old pace, and they're keen to respond as quickly and effectively as they can. So when the dust settles and the mist clears, they can respond swiftly and effectively. If I could have the next chart, please. Obvious question is, what does this cost? It's something of a movable feast. It's dependent on two key factors, really. The number of competitive brands that you would like us to analyze, and the weight of digital activity or the intensity of digital activity in your category, simply on the basis that some categories are a little less busy than others. But bearing those two factors in mind, and on the basis that most clients are looking to benchmark themselves against 6 to 8 competitors, typically the cost for this entry-level deep dive is £5,000 to £7,000. And given the levels of detail to which we tend to descend, often these reports will be north of 100, 150 pages, as you can imagine when you're covering that number of brands in your universe. And on the basis, this very often forms a brand's digital roadmap for the next 18 to 36 months. We feel that represents pretty good value. Hopefully you do too. Timescale, quite a lot of data to be run. The tools we're running take some time to crunch the data, analysis, and then clearly there needs to be the human involvement in delivering the real analysis. So typically 4 to 5 weeks from commissioning to delivery of the output by way of a timescale. Okay, well that concludes the formal part of our presentation for today. But we've had a very healthy influx of questions. So let's jump onto those and see how many we could address in the time available. First question looks like it might be one for Dave. Dave, I think this one might be for you, if you'd be so kind. In delivering the output of a landscape report, what are the tools we might typically use to generate the output?
I'm a big fan of SEMrush. I use that for a lot of my analysis, especially around content marketing and keyword research. But I would use that in conjunction with AdWords a lot of the time. And Google Search Console is pretty much powerful, actually owned data tool out there for search, because that's real data. It's not estimated, they're not calculated numbers. It's all real. So your own Search Console account's probably one of your best sources of data. And is a great tool as well. For some of the content marketing pieces, if we were to produce some of the suggestions for content strategies for you, we might use an online tool called Answer the Public. It's quite popular, quite well known these days. But you can use that to come up with a list of questions you can build your content strategies around. But yeah, for the main bulk of the analytics, it tends to be Search Console Analytics and SEMrush. I'm a screaming frog if we're doing a technical audit, obviously.
Super. Thanks, Dave. Next question. If you operate in a niche with relatively few competitors, is there still value in a landscape report? Well, I might pick that one up.
I could.
Actually.
Okay.
Well, no, you go ahead, Dave. I'll add if necessary.
Well, I would like to relate that back to that part where I was talking about knowing who your competitors are in search. Because if you feel that you may not have any direct competitors or many, then all you need to do is look for your keywords and see who's ranking for those keywords, because those are your competitors. It's the people who are appearing in the search engines. And it goes back to that question of knowing who your search competitors are compared to who you perceive your competitors to be. So I think that question should help resonate. But what are your thoughts, Neil?
Well, I was going to say, I think we've done quite a lot of work in the insurance aggregation sector, where one might be tempted to think that the number of competitors is relatively small, 3 or 4. But the reality is, I think it is quite a lot broader than that. Whilst a decent chunk of the population have embraced the aggregation model, huge numbers haven't, and they're as much our traffic generation audience as those that have embraced the model. A number of major household name insurers have made a strategic decision not to play on aggregation platforms, Direct Line and Aviva, to name but two. And of course, any insurer that's spending a reasonable sum in terms of digital marketing activity is a potential competitor for an aggregator. So this is a very simple example of how establishing exactly what that competitor set is and how one feels that should best be strategically derived is quite an important exercise in and of itself. Okay, Justin, this feels like this one should best be heading to you. How has the digital marketing landscape changed in the last 3 months?
It's a good question. I like it. I think in this webinar, we've been trying to focus on the fundamental questions, haven't we? And ignored the fact that the world has kind of turned upside down in the last 3 months. I think there's been a few trends that we've seen that are quite interesting. I think initially, Google have released some figures to say that viewing time on YouTube was up by about 20%. I think that then continued. So some figures I saw were around 60% increase in figures viewing times on YouTube. So I think it's really interesting that the fact that we've all been sitting at our computers more over the last few months and using our phones more is translated into the reality that there's more eyeballs to get in front of. At the same time, what we've seen is lots of advertisers pulling back spend, quite understandably. But what that has meant is there's actually been more people watching and fewer people advertising, so the cost of advertising over the last few months has actually fallen. And I know it's not appropriate for everyone, but I think those brands that can afford to invest should be doing so at the moment, particularly in those underused channels like YouTube, where the cost per view is already pretty low, and we're seeing views of a penny a view at the moment. So if you've got a fairly targeted audience that you could want to go out to, then I would say that that's well worth testing YouTube and advertising more generally. I think we've seen the same sort of stuff across display as well. So I think yes, it's not for everybody, because we are mindful of budgets, but I think it's the old business school strategy to say as you come out of a recession, investing in marketing is really important, provided it's the right sort of marketing. But I think if we've got a small budget that we can test, now is the time to be doing so. Hopefully that's
good stuff. Thanks, Justin. Anything to add to that, Dave? If not, I've got a question for you.
I'll take a new question, thanks.
This question would like to know, how often should I be reviewing the top specific search terms we should be targeting? So how often should we be reviewing? Well,
on the one hand, it's a bit of a how long's a piece of string. It depends on the context or the keywords or the niche you're in. But I think, as Justin mentioned there, with the change of the landscape, right now is a very good time to be reassessing everything. I haven't got it to hand, but there's this graph I've seen recently of the financial space, and the trend of like search volumes kind of flat for the year, and then as of March, it's going crazy because people are kind of searching for things around their finances because of the uncertainty around the current situation. So I think definitely now is a good time to reassess the landscape for in any industry. But I mean, I could say broadly speaking, every year you could probably investigate. But what about the seasonality? Or if you're into like retail, that new products come along and then products become less popular. Like I used to work for Argos, and the trends were always changing depending on what products were in that year. So it really does depend on the niche. But certainly now is a good time to be looking. Yeah,
feels like it's a brand specific question which requires a brand specific answer, really, isn't it? Or at least
as are most questions in yeah. But hey, very happy to answer that question at a sector specific level with whoever asked that question.
Okay, you might both have some observations on this. Voice search, what's the trend? And how should brands best be trying to capture the search volume that exists?
Do you want to take that, Dave?
I think we might share this one. We do. My thoughts are, it goes back to the content marketing area where we're aligning content to user intent and looking at long tail search queries. You don't voice search is growing in popularity, and I accept that, and that's great. You don't necessarily have to obsess over voice search specifically, but by actually just answering people's questions with great content, you're doing it by default. So it's more like I would look at voice search as a byproduct of good content marketing, and if you're producing content that people are genuinely interested in, you'll get that audience anyway. So that's my thought on it. It is important, but actually it's more of a byproduct of good content marketing rather than to focus on it as the primary, would be my opinion.
I completely agree with that, Dave. I would only add that kind of in the conversations that I've had with Google about this, they were talking about voice search quite a lot a few years ago. But it seems to me that voice search is used in specific circumstances, and it tends to be around kind of what time is it? Those sorts of, what's the weather like today, Google? Give me a recipe. So I mean, it's very, very either top of the funnel is the best you kind of get to with voice search. A lot of it is just kind of factual questions that get answered. And if you're doing good content marketing, you should be answering those questions anyway. When I speak to Google, they're not seeing an easy way of monetizing those searches, and therefore they're not thinking about it as something that's really going to change the commercial landscape, although it'll definitely change the way that people live their lives. It's being able to monetize it, I think, will be difficult for marketers.
Good stuff. Thank you. inevitably, the questions that have been raised have led to more questions. So I wouldn't say we've been deluged, but there's been a healthy uplift in the level of questions. So we may not get to them all whilst we're live. But let's, in the 7 or 8 minutes remaining, let's answer as many as we can. Next question. Again, I think you might both have a perspective on this. The landscape report appears to be a rear view mirror. To what extent are we able to predict future search trends?
Dave, why don't you take this, because you were talking to the FT about this subject this morning, so you've answered it already once today.
I was, and it's yeah, and it is a tough one. I think it's really about when it comes to understanding where things are going. We can't, when you have like I showed it, I think earlier on in my presentation, we could see that the holiday trend was going down and the long-tail stuff was going up. And we can see where the trend is going because of where it's come from. So we can use that rear view mirror look to plot out trajectories going forwards. And I mentioned earlier about this graph in the finance space, where due to the circumstances of what was happening with the world, that completely changed the search landscape, and more people were searching around their financial concerns. So really, it's about aligning the content you're producing to the real world and what's happening around you, and actually having a sense of where things are going and how that's impacting your business or your industry. And so actually, that would kind of, my recommendation there would be to have, align some of your content strategies with some of the broader marketing aspirations of the business. And there's going to be, depending on the business and the size, but there's going to be commercial members of the team who are going to have a sense of what is the year ahead for their own industry. And that could be integrated into your content marketing, so that you're actually sort of plotting out predictions. And actually predictive content's actually a very good style of content as well, but that's for another day. So there isn't really a great answer for that, other than just being the best in your industry and being on it from a news point of view, and knowing where the industry is going, and actually doing regular
I would add in
audits can actually.
Yeah, Dave, I would just add in on a day-to-day basis. Google Trends, I mean, is a tool that is much underused, but I think works really well at looking at a long-term horizon. So you can see trends over the last 10 years and how searches have been changing, and that's where some of the charts that we show today have come from. So within your niche, look at your brand and how that's developed over time. Are more or fewer people searching for your brand and your competitors' brands? And that will give you some sense of how the market has changed over the longer term. And obviously not everything is going to stay the same, but it may help you to kind of predict more effectively.
Good. Let's see if we can squeeze a couple more in. Justin, I think this is one for you, because I know you've been looking at this closely over recent months. What is the most effective use of video creative in paid activity? And I'm sure one senses they're referring to paid in the broadest sense rather than just PPC or the paid search.
What you mean? What's the most effective channel? Then
I'm inferring what the questioner might be raising, but why not answer that first? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I would say that I've been banging on about YouTube for a very long while now, and I think there's enormous potential in that channel, because what we're able to do with the targeting in YouTube is to combine the intent of search with the emotional storytelling of traditional television advertising at its best, and we combine those into one platform. And when it happens to also to be combined with a mobile phone and you've got a computer in your hand, it means you can see an ad and interact with that brand directly, and I think that will change the whole nature of advertising in the coming years. We'll become increasingly reliant upon video ads, and I think at the moment YouTube is as cheap as chips to advertise on, so I would definitely be testing that. And I think you can apply exactly the same logic to advertising on Facebook. I think perhaps Facebook is a little bit more expensive, but some of the granularity, as we saw, of information that you can get out of FaceTube Facebook is fantastic, and I think there's opportunities in Facebook running video ads. Say it quietly, but video ads on Facebook are still a lot more cost effective than other forms of advertising, and we get some great results from running video on Facebook as well. So I think video as a whole is a great channel to be investing in, whether that's on YouTube or Facebook or even uBook.
Excellent. Final question for today. Feel free to both jump in on this. It's a fairly broad-reaching one. What do we feel is likely to be the most significant digital marketing trend over the next 12 months? Answers, please.
Then I will say machine learning in all of its different forms. I know that means different things in different markets, but I think Facebook, Google have invested heavily in machine learning, and we see increasingly that the machine is taking over the campaign. And so you still need to understand how the campaign works. You still need to understand the emotions of your audience and who it is you're marketing to. But increasingly, I think we're handing over elements of a campaign to the machine. So the manual bits of checking kind of 200 different signals from the advertising system is increasingly being handed over to computer, because the computer's much better at that manual work than we are. And I think humans will be increasingly involved in thinking about brand positioning and kind of the things that we're better at than a machine. But certainly the results that we're seeing from our Google campaigns, where we're letting machine learning take much more of a lead, and the same on Facebook, I think are much better now than anything a human can do on their own.
Cool. Well, from my point of view, a very different answer. For me, it's integration. That it just seems to me that the only way to efficiently run proper marketing these days is to have your ducks in a row, so that you're not sort of running PR in that corner and some SEO in that corner, and they're all separate and they don't talk to each other. It is that we're all working together towards the same ideas, the same campaigns, and running efficiently. So I think the biggest trend I would like to see, certainly as we go forward, is joined up marketing, is working together in integration.
Excellent. I have just, I think that's as far as we can get today. I've just been asked to clarify the cost of the report. I said it's largely dependent on number of competitors and the intensity of activity in your category. But very broadly speaking, we haven't done very many that have been less than £5,000, and I can't think of any that we've done that have been more than £7,000. So they're your parameters. Astonishingly good value, I think you would have to agree. Given those numbers. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Justin, for your contributions. Much appreciated. Most importantly, thank you to everyone who took the trouble and time to attend. We're very grateful. Hope you found it informative and insightful. We will, of course, be sending you the on-demand version of everything you've seen today, including all the accompanying material. And anyone who's posed a question that we haven't had time to respond, we will do so over the next 24 hours on a one-to-one basis. Thank you so much, and goodbye.